You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to the first emergency episode of the offseason here on March 29th. As the first transfer portal domino has dropped for Indiana in terms of someone coming in. Obviously, we've had some news of folks heading out, with Logan Duncombe announcing his transfer and Tamar Bates last night announcing his transfer as well. But this morning, Wednesday morning, we got the first announcement of a new Hoosier coming in, and that is Payton Sparks from Ball State, who was on campus yesterday or a couple days ago, and a lot of chatter kind of started to heat up behind the scenes that this may happen. And so Indiana, which obviously is losing a lot of production and depth inside with Trace Jackson Davis gone, with Race Thompson gone, looking to restock that, and they do it with Payton Sparks, an in-state player from Winchester, Indiana. Played his last 2 years at Ball State, averaging roughly 13.5 points, about 8.5 boards, a couple of assists a game. Really known as kind of a rugged inside presence, perhaps a little bit undersized, but able to make up for that with some quickness, with some power, with some footwork. And so we're going to spend some time here on this edition of the Assembly Call, talking to you about what kind of player Payton Sparks is, how he fits, and what this means kind of overall for the trajectory of Indiana's offseason. And to do that, the coach, Jerod and Tonsoni, is here with me. We're going to be joined here in a little bit by Evan Wilson, our friend from Akron, who helped us preview Kent State. Obviously, his team at Akron has played Ball State a couple times each of the last few seasons, so he'll be joining us as well here in about 20-30 minutes to give his thoughts on Payton Sparks as well. But Coach, let's start with you. Give me your initial reaction to this commitment for Indiana.
Well, the transfer portal is just a fascinating thing right now, and you have to embrace it. When you have heavy hits because of graduation in the past, you weren't able to rebuild as fast, and you weren't able to rebuild as you wanted to rebuild because transfers had to sit out a year, and so it's exciting. Sad to see some players leave because you get connected to them, but it's also exciting to see some of these players coming in. And the quick analysis of a short film that I watched, it's a highlight film. We're getting a low post presence. It's not the type that is TJD, but it is a young man who played here in Indiana high school basketball, loves Indiana University, is going to come in and be a role player and someone who can score in the low post. So it's exciting to get that first piece. There's obviously pieces that Mike Woodson are going to want to bring in that are going to be maybe more of a lead player, I would imagine. But this guy can score in the post, as he's double digits in the MAC. And watching his tape, he's got some things about him that will fit in to what's happening. So I look forward to watching more film on him and, thinking what's the next domino to fall.
So let's dig in a little bit, more to kind of what he is as a player here in a second. I think, one of the initial things, the initial reactions that people have, Coach, when you see a recruitment like this, and especially a commitment, is, wait a minute, are we going to be playing the too big thing again, with a couple of guys who don't really have outside games with Sparks and Renew? Is this the only big man that we're going after? I would say, we have to be patient. So we need to obviously, analyze this and talk about this and figure out what Payton is going to bring. But I wouldn't yet, try to go 10 steps down the road and assume what this means. For example, we know that Indiana is going after Caden Shedrick from Virginia, a much different type of player. Payton Sparks is a back-to-the-basket guy. He's not a rim protector. He's a good rebounder, but doesn't have a real versatile offensive game, whereas Shedrick is, several inches taller, more of a rim protector guy, more of a lob threat. I don't see any reason why Indiana wouldn't still go at him full bore, because there's room for all of those guys. We're playing in the Big Ten. And as much as, we all looked at the NCAA tournament and thought, hey, we need to get, be less inside dominant. We need to get more athletes, all of those things, which are true. We also still have to navigate a 20-game Big Ten schedule. And so having a guy who can go down there and bang and get you rebounds and give you size down low and be able to compete against some of these other Big Ten players, I think there's a lot of value there. And so to me, if you're looking at bringing in Payton Sparks as a starting center in the Big Ten, I don't think that's a great position to be in. I think that really limits the kind of ceiling that you're going to have. But if you're bringing Payton Sparks in as a guy who's going to be a strong rotation player, who based on different matchups can play more or less minutes, can really come in there and give you energy, can be an offensive rebounder, can draw fouls, which are all things that he can do, that's something really valuable to have there between 8 to 10 in your rotation. And so, I think Indiana is still going to be looking, obviously, to fill out the top part of the rotation with, more guys at a starter level, at a difference-making level, at a high major level. But I think Payton Sparks can represent really, really valuable depth. And by all accounts, he's a guy who grew up wanting to be a Hoosier. Obviously, Indiana has close ties to the Ball State coaching staff with Michael Lewis there. And so, the other big question is just how does the guy fit? What kind of culture fit is he for what you're doing? I feel like Indiana was probably pretty far along in having an understanding of that too. So I think there's a lot to like about this. Again, there may be some concerns if we get to the end of transfer portal season and we haven't brought in another big and you're going into a season without a real rim protector down there. We can address all that. But I don't think this means by any stretch of the imagination, Coach, that Indiana is done trying to fill in the front court. But you do, at some point, need to just raise the floor with depth and with solid pieces. And I think that, to me, is what Payton Sparks represents.
Well, this whole thing needs to be done with patience. There are tons of names out there. They're entering, daily, and the coaching staff, from the head coach all the way down, Adam Howard's working on it. They're working on it. You have to have patience. But the thing is, when you lose 7 players and you have 2 recruits coming in, that's 5 spots. You're not recruiting everyone to be that superstar starter. You have to recruit people and get people that have maybe a couple years left if you want to go that way versus a graduate transfer. And you have to build your roster. And the fun thing for IU fans is not to judge this just by itself as, this is the number one, the first one, this is the lead guy of the program. You have to build a roster. So, one way I was talking with my son, we were traveling back from the baseball game last night. In some ways, this is, Logan Duncan elects to go elsewhere in his development. He was going to be a post player who was going to get some run. Payton Sparks comes in with 2 years experience and double digits in a pretty solid league. That's an upgrade to the roster, however he's going to be used. And then, I had some audio issues there, and you were talking about the style of play. It'll be interesting to see, is it the 2-post thing that we've had in the past? I don't think Sparks fills the Trace Jackson Davis dominance that we had by any means. But I do think he is someone who is capable of playing in the Big Ten, and only time will tell. But, yeah, have patience with the building of this roster. It's an exciting time, and I'm excited because I think it's a culture piece too. I think this young man really buys into Coach Woodson and what we've heard behind the scenes that he really wants to be at Indiana. You need some of that too when you're going to bring in 5, 6, 7 new players to make sure what Coach Woodson has done well is build that Indiana program back to getting in the tournament. You need those culture pieces, and you got an Indiana guy who wants to be here. I think you had to take him, and he's skilled enough.
Yeah, and, look, I think we all have just huge hopes for Malik Renew and what he can do moving forward in his Indiana career. He's also been a guy who's been very prone to foul trouble. And so, Payton Sparks gives you another guy who is proven, as kind of a high-efficiency player down there in the post who can do some of those things that Malik can do. And so whether you're building that front court depth for injury, for fouls, whatever it is, I see some folks in the chat, and I totally get it. Hey, we need shooting, we need rim protection, we need some of these things. And it doesn't seem like this guy brings it, and I get that. But as we've said with the transfer portal, it's so easy, Coach. I think sometimes, you watch all these NCAA tournament games and it's like, okay, we need a Nigel Pack and we need a Jordan Miller and we need a Marquise Noel and we need, Omir. Like you start going through and it's like, you want to get all these perfect pieces. Let's get John L. Davis from FAU. And it's easy to kind of run wild thinking about that. And Indiana's trying to do that with some of the higher end guys like the Timberlakes and the Ledlums and the Shedricks that they're going after. But you still have to fill out a 13-man roster that can help you navigate the regular season to even get to the NCAA tournament. And that's where I think Payton Sparks can really help. I don't think you necessarily look at him as a guy that, hey, when we get to the Elite Eight, he's going to be the difference maker. Although having a guy for 5-10 minutes in a game, as we saw against Miami, who can just come in and get some rebounds, that could be pretty valuable. And so I think that's a bit of a segue here, Coach, into talking about some of the strengths that Payton Sparks brings. Because it's easy to look at some of the stuff that he doesn't, and I understand some of the concerns. He's a big guy who doesn't protect the rim. He's a big guy who doesn't really step out and shoot. I mean, almost everything that he does is at the rim. He's a guy who needs post touches, probably on offense when he's in the game to be valuable, although I think you'll be able to get some second chance points from him as well. And his free throw shooting is a bit up and down. As a freshman, he shot 70% on 200 attempts, which is really good, for a guy who plays like he does. And then that dropped to 51.7% this year. And so when you look at what he does really well, he is elite at drawing fouls. And that is something that tends to translate. Like if you draw fouls, that's just something that you're probably going to do. He was third in the country last year in free throw rate. And so he's going to get to the line. Obviously, if he can capitalize with better free throw shooting, that would be really helpful. But that is something valuable to help you get other Big Ten big guys into foul trouble. And his rebounding numbers are outstanding. You're losing two very good rebounders in Trace and Race. Payton Sparks is a guy who comes in with a defensive rebounding percentage of 22%. That is very good. His offensive rebounding percentage is 12.6%. As a freshman, it was 12.5%, so that is, very consistent. He was in the top 3 in the MAC, in the top 100 nationally. And so to me, when you look at what he's, bringing in, Coach, again, I don't think he's a guy that you necessarily pencil in for 15 to 20 minutes a game. I think if that ends up being the case, this roster probably didn't fill in how we wanted it to. But I think he's a guy who can play 5 to 10 minutes per game pretty much every night, give you depth, give you some offensive rebounding, come in and get a couple of buckets. And then in some of those matchups where you have Malik in foul trouble, or you're going up against the Big Ten, or you just need a spark, and someone who's a little bit fresher to come in and give you some offensive boards on a night when no one else is rebounding, and we had a few of those, Sparks is a guy who can come in and do that. And so, you don't like the fit as much in terms of like from a macro sense, you're not going to build an offense around this guy. But, man, you look at some of the things he does, and they were things that really would have helped Indiana in some games this year if you had a guy who could come in and do some of those things. So I would, make sure while you're lamenting some of the things he can't do, remember the guy can do some stuff too and has been a very productive player in the MAC for 2 straight seasons. And some of those things can be valuable. Maybe not necessarily to win a Sweet 16 game, but maybe to win 2 or 3 games in February when you're just trying to keep the momentum of the season going. And that is important. It's not all just about March. You have to get to March too. And I think Payton Sparks is the kind of guy who's going to be able to help Indiana do that throughout the Big Ten season based on the stuff that he does bring to the table.
Well, you need 3 or 4 4s and 5s. The structure of your 4s and 5s are going to be interesting to watch, but you need that number of players. So it just happened that we got this 5 who's going to be maybe a 15-minute guy first, and so that's where you got to have patience. You need someone in that role, and why not get a guy who played at Ball State who had that kind of stuff? The thing that impressed me about the list of stats is rebounding, and rebounding was an area that Indiana late in the season especially really got abused. And so when you bring someone in to back up the 5 or whatever rotation Coach Woodson decides to play him in that second unit, those are key things. Collecting fouls. What I saw in the brief amount of film I watched right away this morning when you said we were going to go on from inside the hall, he does a nice job of sticking his shoulder in the chest of defenders. Now you're playing up against the Big Ten, you're playing up against some bigger guys. But again, if he's coming off the bench 15, he's playing those minutes. I think that translates too. But he's really good with his body. He goes both hands, right and left. So if he posts on the right side, he'll turn on the left shoulder and be able to score. Almost every shot was whatever side of the basket it was on. He was using that. That's something that, as great as TJD was, until his senior year, he didn't do very well. So he has a knack. He has a knack for creating that contact, which gives him a little bit of separation, and that allows him to score oversized. Will that translate to the Big Ten? We'll see. But again, those are little things that I do think translate. Those are little skills. We don't need him to get 13 to 14 points a game at Indiana. We need him to come in and play solid minutes in a foul situation, or to rest and make sure that we have you don't have to play anyone 38, 39 minutes at the starting five like we have in the past. So, yes, he does some things. Getting to the foul line late, too, as a sub, if he is coming off the bench, that builds fouls, and you get into the bonus. And those are things that can help Indiana win games. But I just think, again, his energy and his ability to find spots in the low post are something that you want in a post player. And I think that's what Coach Woodson saw and wants him in the program.
Yeah, and he, fouls committed per 40 minutes. He's been right at about 3.5 both seasons. That's not elite like Trace Jackson Davis's 2, but it's not as bad as Malik's either. And so he's not a guy who is overly foul prone. I'll tell you the other thing that I like about him, Coach. And again, need to couch these statements. I'm not as high on this if he ends up being a 22 to 25 minute per game player, right? I think this is better in kind of a 12 to 15 minute per game role. Kind of like the role that Malik Renew had this year to a certain extent. If that's what he ends up playing, then I like this. If not, we'll come back and we'll have to have some bigger conversations about what this means. But that won't be as much about Sparks. It'll be about Indiana swinging and missing on some other guys that they're going after. But the other thing I kind of like about him, Coach, is he's got a bit of a nasty streak to him, like on the court. Like he's competitive, he's tough, and you start thinking about games against Rutgers and games against Northwestern this year. And, for as much as, you love just the skill of Trace Jackson Davis, and sometimes you would see that come out and he would just go dominate. But there's also sometimes it's like kind of like an offensive lineman. You just want someone who's a little nasty sometimes. And I think Payton Sparks will get in there and get tough. He's not going to back down, from a physical battle. And again, I just think through the rigors of a 30-game season, you're going to need someone like that. And so I think that's something else that he can bring to the table that can be valuable. You saw the impact that X's attitude had, on this team. And I think getting X back, having a guy like Payton Sparks there, just to kind of be a straw that stirs the drink a little bit. I don't think that's a bad thing to have as you go through Big Ten play.
Yeah, he seems to have a physical presence to his play. When he would post up a couple times in that film, he really did a good job finding an angle in the post by putting his hips and his rear end into someone and driving them up the lane, and then having the baseline to drop step and score. So again, I'll be looking forward to watching some more complete game film to see how physical he is on defense. Again, not the rim protector, but can he get in there and battle physically as a defender? So I think there's a lot to his game that could add to the Indiana Hoosiers.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining us now, live from Akron, Ohio, it is Evan Wilson. For those who don't remember, Evan is our buddy who goes to Akron. He's a walk-on for the Akron Zips basketball program, grew up an Indiana basketball fan, but was here to help us preview the Kent State game, did a great job. And obviously when I heard that Payton Sparks might be committing, he was one of the first people I reached out to help give us a scouting report, because, Evan, your Zips have played Ball State a couple times each of the last few seasons. You've gone through the scouting report process with Payton Sparks. So welcome, and give us your initial reaction to Payton Sparks' commitment to Indiana.
Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all, and I enjoy coming on here. The first thing that comes to mind is that kid is so passionate. Like, when you watch him play, you see the passion and you see the fire and you see the desire to play well, not necessarily for himself, but just for the team. I have a couple of mutuals like related to him. I've never sat down and like talked to him, and we follow each other on Instagram and whatever, but I've never really had a conversation with him. But one of my good buddies from home, from Noblesville, lived in Winchester and was good friends with him before he moved to Noblesville, which is Winchester is where Payton's from. And then one of the managers for the Ball State men's basketball team graduated from Noblesville. His name's AJ Hudson. He worked a lot with Sparks, and just between those two, I've been able to see just as a person how bad he wants it. He's in the gym all the time, plays with fire and passion. So you'll never question the want to. And I think the fans are going to love to watch him play because of how hard he plays every night. Obviously, that's been something that fans have not necessarily complained about, but have raised questions for previous teams. But that'll never be a question for him. As far as play style, he's tough, really, really, really strong. I mean, he's probably one of the physically stronger guys that we play in the MAC year round. When Ball State comes to town or when we go to Ball State, we know it's going to be physical, just, not necessarily for the rest of the team, even though they're physical as well, but just because we know he's going to look to hit somebody every time that ball goes up on both sides of the floor. So he's a physical player. He's a good athlete. He runs well. You would think for a guy with that much size, they wouldn't be able to run well, and he can run the floor pretty well and got pretty good motor. Played heavy minutes both seasons. His numbers look pretty identical as we look here. He was 13.5 his freshman season and 13.3 his sophomore season. One thing that definitely improved over the last 2 years of his game is his passing ability. He was MAC Freshman Player of the Year his first year. I know we double teamed him a couple times, and teams across the league double teamed him this season. And he was a much more not only accurate passer but willing passer as well. I think that's something that people don't realize, that you can be a good passer, but if you're not willing, you're not going to see those numbers. And you're not going to get guys open. So he's a very willing passer.
To back that up, his assist rate jumped from 8% his freshman year to 13% last year in the same amount of minutes. So
when he saw the double and he was willing to pass. Obviously, sometimes you can quick spin or you can kind of fight through a double team, but definitely a willing passer, and he's tough with the ball in the post, especially on double teams. He's not one to really fumble it or turn it over in that sense. He's going to make a pretty good decision. Not much of a jump shooter. He shot only a couple threes. Free throw percentage isn't great, but as soon as I say that, every time we played them, he seemed to shoot 80 or 90% from the free throw line. So it was always a note on the scouting report that he wasn't a great free throw shooter, and then he'd end up 14 of 15 from the line, and we're looking at the stat sheet like, dang, how did he do that tonight? But no, he's a great competitor. He's been fun to watch, been fun to play against, fun to prepare for as well. And I think he can provide a lot for the Hoosiers moving forward.
Yeah, he was 9 for 12 against Akron from the free throw line this year.
that first game we played, there was 44 fouls called, and we had like 2 guys foul out and 3 guys with 4 fouls. So everyone was fouling left and right, and there was a ton of free throws going up. And anytime we went to the line, we were kind of like, okay, we're going to get one here. And he seemed to hit 2 in a row just about every trip down the floor. So he made it tough on us for sure, and it's a testament to his competitiveness. He's a great competitor.
So what are some of the weaknesses to his game that you think, could potentially be exacerbated by moving up a level to the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think he's relied on his athleticism a lot, and for good reason as well. Just he's an unbelievable athlete. You see his size. So I think his footwork, he's going to need to work on his footwork, and I trust that the staff understands that, and they're going to get with him on that. I know he's heavy left hand. It doesn't take any. You watch a couple games and you'll see that he goes to his left hand quite a bit. But as we say that, Trace went to his left hand quite a bit and seemed to make it work out just fine over a course of 4 years. So just being, I guess, more than one dimensional in the post, being willing to spin both ways, being willing to use both hands is probably important for big athletes in the Big Ten, especially if they're starting to crowd him on one side. And then just a free throw shooting, it's not just, I think free throw shooting in general is a lack of a lot of people's games. It's free throw. They're free. So I think it's not just him, it's everybody and across the country. But if he could shoot close to that 70% number that he shot his first season, it'll make him less of a foul target, probably give him more minutes as well. If the game's close and Woodson knows that they're going to foul somebody, they're definitely coming at him first just based off his percentages. So if he can improve that, he's not only helping himself, but he's helping the team and getting more minutes.
Evan, Coach Tonsoni here. I got my start in Noblesville about 30 years ago. So
awesome.
The Millers are close to my heart as well. When you talk about, did you guys play him predominantly on that strong hand? In the film we saw on Inside the Hall, he did do some drop stepping to his right. was he not as efficient going to his right, and was that something you guys scouted in your scouting report when you played against him?
We tried a bunch of different things. I think a lot of teams will tell you that as well. That with players such as great as him, that it's never going to be one decision for the rest of the game, because good players like him, they sees it one time and puts it in the back of his head. Next time he goes down there, he's going to attack that way. So I think he's a great player in the sense that he can make adjustments just as well as a coaching staff can make adjustments. So we tried a lot of things. Some things worked, some things didn't. Some things worked one game and didn't the next, and didn't one game and worked the next. So it's with great players like him, you got to throw a lot of different things at them to make them think a little bit. But he's a great thinker of the game. He's a great reactor. Like I said, just being a willing passer helped his game so much this season and made him really dangerous, because if you were to double team him, you throw it in there and you double team him, and he's got a shooter on his side, he's going to throw it right out, and there goes a 3-ball without him even taking a dribble. And he was regarded as one of the better bigs in the league. So he's great at reacting at a lot of different things. But I think in the Big Ten, he obviously won't be as highly touted as Trace, so he's going to get a lot of more one-on-one looks where he can kind of go to work. And I personally, I trust his ability. He's strong as all get out, so I'm excited to watch him play.
How is he defensively in the post? We're used to seeing Trace Jackson Davis swat everything above the rim. I don't know that Payton has that rim protection, but how does he play defensively inside in the post?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, like I mentioned, the biggest thing with him is how strong he is. He's gonna if there's a 100 Dickinson is backing him down, and he's already got 20 on the board, then we'll probably throw a trap at him. Like Woodson will probably throw a trap, but he's never gonna throw a trap with Woodson or with Payton as the primary guard, because he's not big enough. He's gonna fight. He's gonna fight for position on both ends of the floor. He's really strong. He can push catches out, which is important when you're guarding bigs. But like you mentioned, he's not the vertical athlete that Trace was, and that's nothing against him, because Trace is an unbelievable vertical athlete. But Payton still has good length. One thing that I think he can bring to the Big Ten that you don't see very often is his ability to take charges, and you don't see that a lot with big men. He's really good at getting in position and seeing a guy come downhill a little bit out of control or come off one leg, and that's a perfect time to take a charge. And it's something that is very important in the MAC as well. I know for our team, and it's not just us. We get charges against us. We take charges. It's something really important when you play some high-level athletes. So I think that's something that he can bring to the table, is that he's not necessarily going to go up there and swap balls into the third row, but he's going to take a charge and create a turnover for your team. So good defender, and like I mentioned earlier, he's got a pretty good motor, which helps in any conference in America.
One of the things that's always a question for a guy moving up a level is how his game, how his mentality will translate to a different role. You mentioned before, I mean, he's played at least 70% of the minutes in both of his seasons at Ball State, and he's been in a featured role. He's used 24.5% of possessions this season, 24.8% last season. So, I mean, their offense was being run through him. It seems, and again, it's still early in the transfer portal season, but it seems like he's being brought in as more of a depth piece, not necessarily a featured player. How do you think his game, how do you think his mentality, as much as you know about him, how do you think that translates to a higher level but a smaller role potentially?
Yeah, I don't think that phases him. I think one thing that's important to understand when, not that I've done it, but when you move up a level, is it's very rare for a player to move up a conference per se and have the same or better numbers. I think the perfect example from the MAC has been Mark Sears. Like that's an unbelievable season that he put together, coming from I think he was around 18 to 20 point per game guy at Ohio the year before. All league guy, and then to move to Alabama, which was a top 5 team in the country and just an absolute powerhouse all season, and to still put up not even, I think he was around 15, but just to have double digits in general and start some games like that's something that's very rare. So that's something that you don't expect, and I bet Mark Sears didn't expect that as well. But I think Payton will be ready to take in any role. Like I mentioned, I know a couple people around him, and he seems like a good guy, and obviously he's growing up in Indiana. And growing up in Indiana, you either want to go to Purdue, you want to go to IU. I don't care what you say. And if you live up north, you probably want to go to Notre Dame. But a lot of people, they grow up and they want to be at that big stage. So now that he's got that opportunity, I expect him to be great at taking in any role that he's given. And like I mentioned earlier, just playing it as hard as he does.
Let me ask you this. I assume you watched the Indiana-Miami game?
I sure did.
Yeah, not a pretty one. Like, I mean, is that a game that you can see Payton Sparks helping in? I mean, it was up and down, but I mean, Indiana's just getting killed on the glass. Like, is that a game where you see inserting a guy like him, he can be kind of a tone changer, tone setter? Because to me, like, as I look at him, that's the thing that I keep coming back to. Indiana fans keep talking about we need shooting, we need all this. It's like, did you watch us rebound? I mean, there was such a lack of just aggressiveness from a rebounding perspective that it feels like he's the kind of guy that can really help reverse some of that in an important way.
Yeah, that's a good question too. I can't remember his name, and I'm mad at myself for being a bad fan. But the Miami big man, I mean, he was a monster.
Omier.
Yes, he walked on the floor, and you're just like, oh my god, he's a monster. Like, he's huge. So putting a guy like Sparks on him, whether Sparks starts, whether he comes off the bench, whether he plays 30 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever time he gives to put him on him, and that's kind of an equalizer. It's instead of him going crazy on the glass, now you got somebody that can really bump with some big guys too. I don't know. Ball State didn't play super fast, so I have never seen Sparks play up and down fast, just because that's just not what their team did. But like I mentioned, he's got a good motor, so I wouldn't put anything past him because he's such a worker. But that's definitely a game where he can help control pace as well. When I watched that game, I felt like this game is being played strictly to Miami's pace. And when Miami wanted to slow it down and run a set, we slowed it down and run a set. And then when they wanted to run, we try to run back at them. And you don't win a lot of games playing at the other team's pace. So I think Sparks, as far as the paint presence, can help control some of that pace and grab a rebound and kind of slow things down. And like I mentioned, just be an equalizer to any really big and strong guy that comes into the paint.
Yeah, I think a smart way for Indiana fans to look at this, because I think there can be some disappointment if you're looking at this as, oh, we're replacing Trace with Payton Sparks. No,
right, yeah.
You're replacing Logan Duncombe with Payton Sparks.
Yeah.
And Logan Duncombe, obviously a guy that, look, we all liked, and thought he had a lot of potential, but was just never able to get on the court. Payton Sparks, I don't think, has missed a game due to injury, has he? I know he played 29 games this year. He played 30 last year. I mean, he's been really durable.
Yeah.
And so again,
I'm seeing 31 games played, 31 started both seasons.
Yeah, and I think those are all really important things to factor in here. Is, that's great. If you get a guy who's like the perfect shooter and rim protector and does all these things that we're looking for, but if you can't get on the court, who cares? Right. This guy is actually going to be on the court, while filling in some of these needs Indiana has. And I think that's obviously going to be important. I'm curious from your perspective. You go through the slog of a conference season, especially. We know what it's like in the Big Ten. The MAC is similar. It's a little bit lower level player, but I mean just that slog is going to be very similar. You've scouted each other. When you're in the dog days of January and February, it's like, man, you're just trying to get to the end. Like, how important is it to have a guy like him who, it sounds like from all reports, is just a constant energy guy, and having that kind of attitude, to just be able to come in and give you sparks, in games, even if he's not the guy that you focus on as like, hey, this changes our ceiling for an NCAA tournament. It seems like he's a floor raiser in conference play that can be really valuable.
Yeah. And I think his energy is a testament to Michael Lewis as well. Coach Lewis has done an unbelievable job. And I know just a couple people around the program, and they say he's tough. They say he's going to get on you, but from a opposing player standpoint, that guy has energy and he wants to win every possession. So he's a competitor, and I think that was instilled in Sparks. He had good energy his first year, but I think you could see a difference the second year, not just from him, but from the team as well. But yeah, he's going to come in, he's going to play hard, and especially, if the season were to start tomorrow, he probably has a role player role, and not necessarily a starter role with a lot of touches. And like you mentioned, if you're late into January and we get whatever Indiana version team that we get for that day in January or February, I think he's a guy that can break that mold and will come in and play his tail off. And whether they let him go 5 minutes and he picks up 2 fouls, or he goes 15 minutes straight and is rebounding and playing good defense, I think he's going to bring the energy, he's going to bring the heat, put the pressure on the other team, whether it's their backup big or their starter big, because he doesn't care. He's looking to compete. He doesn't care what the name on the front or the back of the jersey is. So he's definitely someone that can help the energy side, and probably the consistency side of Indiana as well.
I like that. He sounds to me like a guy some fans may be questioning now Similar to how they were when X transferred. And then it took about a month or two of fans realizing, holy crap, this guy competes his ass off every second he's on the court, for fans to really start giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I think Payton Sparks profiles to be that guy. Even though there's probably going to be some matchups where he struggles and it's like, whoa, this is a big step up from the MAC to the Big Ten. It just seems like he's going to play so hard and be so tough that he's going to win people over pretty quickly. Just based on kind of what I've heard about him,
and being an Indiana kid, the Hoosiers love having Indiana people and are tired of Matt Painter out recruiting us. So having another Indiana guy on the roster is awesome.
Hey man, let me ask you this, and I don't know how much you know about this stuff, kind of the NIL landscape, but I'm kind of curious. Do you have any sense, for a guy like Payton Sparks going from being a star at the MAC to being more of a role player at a Big Ten school, is that done with the thought that, hey, there's going to be more NIL opportunities at Indiana than there would be for me, at the MAC level? Do you know how that kind of shakes out generally?
I think if you just go case by case, it's an obvious yes that you're going to get more opportunity for NIL. I'm not aware of how many NIL deals MAC players have, but it seems to not be not nearly as much as a Big Ten player. You could be a Big Ten six man and pull in quite a bit of cash from NIL, and it just doesn't happen at the MAC level because we don't get the viewership. The fan bases aren't as large, so we're already at a disadvantage in that sense. But and it's also case by case with transfers as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he transferred just out of the love of Indiana, and if he's an Indiana fan, I'm not sure, but having a bigger opportunity and staying home. That could have been his reason. If he was looking for NIL money, there's going to be NIL money to have as well. And that's something that you don't really know until you're kind of in that inner circle. But the opportunity is absolutely going to be there. I see Indiana from a very outsider's perspective when it comes to NIL, and those guys are making some good deals. Leal is a great guy, great team guy, but doesn't play a lot of minutes, and he's got a deal. He's always talking about real estate on his Twitter and on his Instagram. So if you see a guy with not getting very many minutes is getting deals, then there seems to be deals for everybody there, and opportunities for everybody there. Unlike the MAC, where you have to kind of go and get yours, you have to go and find it. I think it'll definitely be there for him. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the type of guy that's not worried about the money and just worried about playing ball. He seems like that type of guy from the outside looking in, but you never know until you're in the inner circle.
As you've seen a lot of these names pop up in the transfer portal, is there anybody that you've kind of really had your eye on, either because they're in the MAC or you guys played them, or someone that you're like, ooh, I wish Indiana would go after that guy, or maybe I hope that guy doesn't end up at a rival Big Ten school because he's really good and people are sleeping on him?
Yeah, it's a great question until you go on Verbal Commits' Twitter and they say there's 1,000 names in the portal. I mean, it's unbelievable how many people are in the portal. The only one that really stuck out is a guy from Oregon, Jalel. They say he's on the MAC. He was on the mock draft boards coming into this season and only averaged, I think, 6 or 7 a game. So just didn't work out at Oregon. So a guy of that talent is always a good addition. It's always nice to have talented guys, but character is a big thing too. If he's a talented guy and his character is not great, then he's not going to work out in Indiana. So I wish I had an answer for you, but since there's 1,000 names in the portal, and I just tend to look for the MAC guys and see what's going on in the MAC. And I guess my only answer would be anybody that's big. Losing such a presence with Trace, and then and probably a guard too. You're gonna lose Jalen Hood-Schifino. I'm surprised he hasn't declared to the draft yet because he had such a great year. And I think I was looking at mock draft boards yesterday, and he's definitely top 15 and might be in between that 15 to 10 range. So he's gonna pull a lot of money and a lot more money than he would if he were to stay to get NIL deals, in my opinion. And he's got that Adidas sponsorship already as well. So. I'd be surprised if he stayed. So looking for a guard that can kind of score it, and then obviously anything to help replace a little bit of Trace because you're never going to get all of him. He's a once-in-a-generation player. So, yeah, just looking for a big guy, looking for talented guys that are coming in and ready to work hard.
Boy, that's it. It's interesting hearing it from that perspective because that's something that's so easy, Coach, to overlook when you talk about transfer guys and you look at their numbers and how is this going to project? And it's like, all right, but bottom line, is this guy ready to come in and accept a role? Is this guy ready to come in and work? And that's why I think you got to take a full 360-degree view with this stuff. I know no one entered the offseason saying we want a guy who profiles like Payton Sparks in terms of the skills that he brings to the table. But, man, just peel back like 1 or 2 layers of the onion, and you can see how this guy really fits on what this team needs. You got to fill in around him, but roster management is about finding pieces, and you're not going to find, there's not one magic guy out there who fills all of them, but I think from everything that I've learned so far, I'm trying to take a skeptical eye with this. There's still a lot to like with what this guy brings to the table, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with some of the intangible stuff, which really matters given how many intangibles are walking out the door with the guys leaving.
Well, when you're replacing 6 or 7 guys on a roster, the culture piece, the word culture is kind of overused in the coaching profession and everything, but it is real. Like how your team fits together matters. So you have an opportunity to fill one of those 6 spots, 7 spots with a young man who has the intangibles that Evan has shared, the passion. I loved it when he started. The first thing he said was passion. Sign me up. Because you're either an energy giver or an energy taker. And I know, Coach Gross has probably talked about that with you guys too. Every coach does. There are players that give the program energy, and there are players that take away. And your stat profile doesn't mention anything about those things, but they're so key. And so when you're filling in a major amount of players, the intangibles that Evans mentioned and that we've talked about, I think really matter in this commitment. And again, as fans, take a bigger macro look at the roster next year instead of who committed first and the absolute needs of the program. There's no doubt we need dudes and we need shooters and 6'7" athletes to match up to the Miller kid at Miami if we're going to advance in the tournament. I think Coach Woodson knows that, and he's going after those guys with the 1,000 kids in the portal. Heck, there's not guys I don't even know that may end up at Indiana right now because of that. So this is the type of thing that Indiana basketball has been in the past, people who love to wear those candy stripes. And it sounds like we have a young man who will do everything to honor those candy stripes and fills a need for 2 or 3 players in the post.
And how many times do we come on post-game shows and talk about toughness? And he sounds like a guy who's really going to help Indiana upgrade there. So, which is good. Anything else, Evan? Just, I guess the only other question. This is probably something that you can't answer. For a guy who draws that many fouls, you want him to make more free throws. The dip from his freshman to his sophomore season is kind of crazy, going from 70.6% to 51.7%. Like, you don't see that very often, and it was on almost the exact same number of attempts. Like, is there anything you saw in his shot where it's like, whoa, like what did he change, or what was your assessment there, if at all?
Well, it looked just the same as last season's as well. I mean, if you put a video by video, it looks the same. But being a shooter myself, there's a lot of tweaks that you can make that can't be seen from the human eye if they're not looking at the right thing. That you do to help that might end up hurting. So I'm not sure if he was tweaking stuff over the off season or whatnot, but I will say it's mental. The free throw line is so mental. It doesn't matter if there's 16 minutes left on the clock or there's 4 seconds left in the game. You saw San Diego State's guy hit one and miss one. I mean, it's mental. He went on after the game and said, "I've worked my tail off," and I'm sure he's shot millions of free throws over his career. But then, it's different when you're in a game. You're a little winded and pressure's on a little bit. So I think it's mental, and he always stepped up confident as all get out. Obviously, I saw 2 games this season where he killed us from the free throw line and didn't shoot the percentages that ESPN is telling us he's going to shoot. But it's all mental and having confidence. I'm sure he works on it a ton. Like I mentioned, my guy over there, the manager, AJ Hudson, he rebounds for him quite a bit, and they're in the gym quite a bit. So I know he's working. I know he's working his tail off on all parts of his game, and it doesn't take a dummy to know that that's a weakness. But I think that's something that will get addressed. It's just about mental and having those reps and being ready to knock them down when you get the chance.
Absolutely. Well, Evan, we appreciate your insight, man. It's always great to have someone who's, kind of been there on the court with these teams or players and able to really give us the up-close perspective. Because like I said, there's only so much that you can really glean from stats, from watching film, and these recruitments. Do you worry at all? I mean, and I know you didn't necessarily go through like the traditional recruiting process yourself, but, you look at some of these recruitments with transfer portal guys, and they're so quick and so fast. It feels like everything is abbreviated, and you're trying to assess not just is this guy a fit with the way that he plays, but is he a fit with the people on our roster? And I don't know if you guys have had, examples with transfers that, in or out of your program. But that seems like something that's really fraught with risk and potential chemistry issues when you just don't have a ton of time to really kind of figure out how these guys are going to fit.
Yeah, it scares me if I were, not that I would ever do it, but to put myself in those guys' shoes, like how fast, like you mentioned, how fast it happens. They can be in the portal this week and they're committed next week. It's like, do you know the names of half the guys on the team? Can you name me the whole coaching staff? Like, they haven't seen campus. I can guarantee you that. So it's that stuff it scares me just as a player, like not necessarily going in blind, but kind of going in blind. But like you mentioned, it's and like Coach mentioned, it's the character piece that you can bring a guy in and they can tell you all the right things, and then he comes in and now he's taking 15 shots in a 5-on-5 scrimmage in 4 minutes in practice. It's like, oh my God, what did we get ourselves into? Or comes in and he tells you he just wants to win and he buys into our role. I think one guy that I will give props to on our team, Trendon Hankerson, he just graduated. He played his last season of college basketball. He's out of eligibility, but he came in on his visit. It was actually Easter weekend of last year, and I was home, but the guys came in, and we were a little skeptical with an in-conference transfer. They had told us that they were bringing – the coaches had told us that they're bringing him on a visit, and we were kind of like, do we need an in-conference guy? Because, there's a lot of pride and passion of every conference. Pride in being top dog and beating teams on the road and at home. So we were a little skeptical, and he came in and he was just a great guy. He told us, I've had a rough go at NIU because they weren't winning a whole lot, and I just want to win, and I can bring things to the table to help this team. And he told the staff that as well, and committed, and he stuck to every word, man. I mean, he was just looking to win every game, whether that was for him to take 10 threes that night or for him to take 2 and guard the other team's best player. He really bought in, and props to him, because it's easy to be committed and be the senior and get that starting role and then just do whatever you want to do for your last season. But he was committed to winning. And I think that's the good and bad about the portal. You get a guy that's telling you all the right things, comes in and just doesn't do that. Or you get a guy that's coming in and just ready to buy in. And I think that's huge for Payton Sparks. I have no doubt that he's going to buy into whatever role he's given. Being a MAC guy coming up to the Big Ten, it's kind of your only option. You're not going to walk out there and be the most talented guy if you were at the MAC to start on a Big Ten floor. So I'm sure his buy-in is going to be great, and that's the beauty of the portal, in my opinion. But there's lots of pros and cons.
Yeah, no, that's really valuable insight, and it's so true, and so hopefully, as you said, hopefully he comes in, buys into his role, and I think if he does, he's got a really valuable role to play on a team that will be looking to keep the momentum going next season. I mean, look, we all hope that Indiana can take a step forward and compete for a Big Ten title and make it into the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. That would be progress from this season, but at a minimum, Indiana's got to keep the momentum kind of where it's at and not take, maybe you take a half step back, but you can't go much more than that. And I think Payton Sparks, to me, profiles as a guy who raises the floor and helps you do that. And then we'll see what guys they fill in around him.
Absolutely. So, I'm excited to see him play.
Yeah, me too. Well, Evan, thank you so much, man, for being willing to jump on here last second. People always get excited when you come on, so we got to find some other opportunities for you to come on. You always give really good insight and analysis, man. So we appreciate it.
I'm always willing. You know how to find me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Evan.
Yeah,
Evan Wilson from Akron helping us talk about Payton Sparks, the newest Indiana Hoosier. And let's see. So Indiana has now. You've got just in terms of the numbers. If we assume that Jalen Hood-Schifino is gone, even though that announcement hasn't been made yet, you've got Xavier Johnson, you've got Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal, Jordan Geronimo, and Payton Sparks, C.J. Gunn, Caleb Banks, Malik Renew, and then also Ja'Kai Newton and Gabe Cupps, which I think puts us at 10. So if you have maybe one more guy transfer out and we still have to wait and kind of see where all that goes, then you might have 4 scholarships to play around with. So it's going to be really interesting now to see what Indiana does with the other ones. But what'd you take away from the conversation with Evan? I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot to like about this one. I really do. If he's able to be slotted into the role that we think he should be slotted into, I think he can play a really important role for this team.
First of all, what a great guest. Evan's just, to come on, and it speaks volumes to some of these athletes that we see just wearing uniforms on game night, but what they bring to their communities, what they bring, elsewhere. But just great to hear him again. It is interesting with the major rebuild, if you will, just in sheer numbers. That Indiana is going to have to go through. I just think this was the more I dig into it, the more this was needed, maybe more from a team standpoint than an overall X's and O's, and the guy can bring something with the X's and O's. Coach Woodson and staff, we talked about you have to trust them to some level. And in a world where we are having emergency podcasts for every commit, right, we add to it a little bit. Everyone's going to jump to a conclusion about this portal recruiting class from Coach Woodson. This is a good piece to the puzzle for next year. It seems it has to play out. It has to happen the way we want it to happen. But you need to be patient. And so what I take away, again, I will go back to the first thing that Evan said, passion. Give me that all the time, because we've had some guys that have been really, really good. And I'm not going to mention names here too, but sometimes we've questioned their passion. And playing for Indiana is special. And if you have a guy who has the stats that Sparks has and has the passion for wearing the candy stripes, that's my major takeaway from what Evan brought today. Is that piece is going to help when you mix in 6 or 7 guys, and plus the recruits, plus the guys that are left over. The thing that I think Coach Woodson does well is that general manager role, that behind the scenes, that talking to the players. I think he does that well. This is a piece that's going to help him mesh all of the different types of players, personalities in. It seems like this could be a key piece to doing that.
Yeah, and again, these are little things that you don't often talk about with scouting reports, but I know matter to people like you as coaches and just matter in the day-by-day of basketball. But what kind of practice player is he like? Because you need guys who bring fire to practice and bring competitiveness to practice too. And I think this is a guy who can help you do that. So again, I think it's important to assess this one, and no assessments are complete. We got to see how guys come out. I distinctly remember talking about how well Evan Fitzner fit, and
right.
that just didn't play out. But I think to me, if you're going to take and I don't think this is a flyer, because I think you've seen this guy play for 2 years. You know what he does. And so you know what you're going to need to do when he's on the court, I think, to get the most out of him as a player. But I think if you're going to take a chance on a guy who maybe doesn't have quite the height that you want and he doesn't shoot how you want, well, okay, does he bring toughness? Is he going to play hard all the time? Does he bring the passion? Does he bring the energy? Because if all you get from the guy is that can be really valuable for his role on the team. And now, the other production and stuff that you get is going to be a bonus. And I think it would be silly to think that the Indiana staff thinks that their front court is complete. I don't think there's any way that that's the case. Again, think of Payton Sparks as more of a fill-in for Logan Duncombe than a replacement for Trace Jackson Davis. And you're not going to find a replacement for Trace Jackson Davis. But I do think the staff, to try to get the most out of Xavier Johnson, you want to find a rim protector and a lob threat. And I think a guy like Caden Shedrick from Virginia is like that. There may be others that come in. I would just be flabbergasted if they're not going to still try and go after those guys just as hard and try and bring that in. And then you've got kind of a three-headed monster down low where you've got kind of this developing high-ceiling guy in Malik Renew who maybe he can add a shot, maybe not, and play the 4, we'll see. But then a proven rim protector and a proven rebounder, kind of post-scorer like Sparks, who in certain matchups is probably going to take advantage and can be the kind of guy that can maybe go get you 6 to 8 straight points, on a night when you're struggling offensively, because he comes in with energy on, January 29th at Iowa. And you got to have guys that help you win those games. So
don't underestimate where he came from too. As you heard Evan talk about the energy and the toughness that Michael Lewis is coaching the Ball State Cardinals. That's kind of an Indiana guy coaching in what seems like an Indiana way, which is what Mike Woodson, that tough love. So there's got to be, I would think, a level of initial trust that this guy's going to show up and work He's constantly in the gym, according to the manager. These are things that Coach Woodson honors and wants for Indiana basketball. So don't underestimate the fact that, we're the stats or the profile or whatever, that this guy comes very coachable, it seems like, from a guy who elevated the Ball State program and is also an Indiana guy. And I would imagine came highly recommended from a coach that, while he's hoping Ball State wins a lot, wants to see his alma mater do well as well. So I think that gives me some comfort in bringing in Payton Sparks, and I think that you mentioned it well. It's a replacement for Logan Duncombe, where Duncombe, what minutes, what run would he get next year based in his third year in a system? And Sparks probably comes in at a little higher level because of the work that he's done on the court in a decent conference. He comes in ability to do more. So it's an improvement to where if we had kept or Logan had decided to stay and we had to develop him for that role, I think that's a good thing. I also think that we're going to get 2 more 4s and 5s. I think we're going to get a stretch 4 of some nation, or a guy that can drive or shoot the 3, who can play the 4. And I think you're going to get another 5, and then you got those 4. That gives you that 4-man rotation in the 4s and 5s. Whether it be Battle, who can shoot the 3 and 4, and again, you mentioned, is Renew going to play some 4? You also can go small and put Banks down there, but I think Banks is more likely to play the 3 next year at 6'7" and start getting some length and ability out there on the floor. But I think you're going to see at least one more 4 or 5, at least I'm guessing 2, with one of them being a perimeter 4 or a guy who can come off the bounce. You're looking at Ledlam and Battle right now as it would fit that 4 spot. The kid from Virginia you mentioned would be at the 5, and then go get a couple of shooters to play around X. Obviously hoping he comes back, and Galloway and Gunn and Banks. I think then you're looking at a chance to get back into the tournament and have a good, successful season. But patience, everyone. Please have patience with Coach Woodson. As these players come available, you're going to take what you want to fit your pieces. It's not going to fall best comes first, and then you fill in the second, then you fill in the 5th spot with what's ever left over. You're going to take the pieces as they come. With 1,000 players, we have to be patient and trust that Coach Woodson has a chance to design his roster the way he wants to for the first time, really. He's behind the 8 ball when he came in, having to take some guys from the Archie Miller and keep them, and then 4 of them washed out, and he brought in some recruits in Renew and Hood Shafino. Now he really gets to mold the way he wants to, and I think that's something we all need to just wait and see what direction Coach Woodson wants to go in.
Yeah, that's all really well said. Jim, I saw in the chat, said, any word on X? Jerod talks like he's back. I think everybody would be surprised at this point if X isn't back. We are certainly approaching our off-season talk, assuming that will be the case. If that is not the case, then we will have another emergency podcast with probably a very decidedly different tone, because I think that would kind of change some of the strategy that the staff is operating with. But I think that continues to be the assumption that Indiana will have Xavier Johnson back. Coach, let me ask you this. If in a couple of years, it's so easy, you come on here, and again, I think as you're assessing the transfer guys that Indiana gets, 2 things to keep in mind. One is, and you mentioned this, the staff isn't necessarily in the order. I'm sure in a perfect world, they would probably love to see who are all the guys available. Let's stack them up in terms of how likely they are to come here. And then let's see, maybe we could get a guy who's even more proven than Sparks. But you know what? He's ready right now to commit to you. So what do? Well, I think you take the commitment, because for all the reasons we've said, I think he can fill a valuable role. And so it's important to kind of remember that these things don't all play out in a linear way how you would want them to. I think the other thing, the other thing that I kind of wanted to address, Coach, is, if we look at this a couple years down the road, and it's like, boy, that Sparks transfer really didn't work, because, we've had some of these that maybe haven't gone quite as well as we would have thought or hoped. What do you think the reasons for that would be as you look at it right now? Like, what are kind of, as you think about this and are skeptical about it, what are those questions in your mind?
I think it doesn't work in the scenario that you put out first. Is if the staff brings him in to be more than that 12 to 15-minute guy. If he is going to have to play a role, let's say things don't work out with all the others, and all of a sudden he's the best option, and then he plays at a level that, again, it's hard to say going in until you see him play, because some transfers play better and some transfers don't, right? But if he plays at a MAC level or below in the Big Ten as a person that we are relying on to replace TJD and Race, then that doesn't work out. It's not what we want. And it would be his inability to score at a 15 to 20-point level. Like, you need a starting – you need either 4 or 5 to be in that, double-digit score. If he can't score double digits – against the bigger talent, I think that's one reason. Obviously, if his passion is there, his rebounding and fouling will always be there. But, if you're bringing a guy in for a role and he plays that's going to be successful. If you bring a guy in and he has to be something more than he's capable of, then that's when I think it may not work out. But I don't know physically what that looks like. I'm guessing it's a points production. Maybe it's a ability to guard a post player that he's not able to guard the Dickinsons and those as he comes up to the Big Ten. The basketball reasons why it doesn't work out, but I think more it's a structure reason. If it doesn't work out, then he's being asked to do something that he's not capable of doing in the Big Ten because of the roster construction. And we've seen that at times with players. But give me a guy who rebounds, give me a guy who's physical, give me a guy who's passionate, and you're going to find some way to play him. If you're bringing a guy in to shoot 42% and he shoots it at a smaller league and then he comes in at 31%, well, it didn't work out. You can guess that. But what we just heard from Evan and what you have heard and what we've shared in text, that at worst this guy's going to bring that energy and bring that culture, and it might not be stats that he ends up helping the Indiana program, but it could be other things down the road. So I don't know if I really answered your question there.
No, you did. I mean, and I think obviously with any transfer, the reason it may not work is if there's a disconnect on what the expectation is for a role. I'd be shocked if that's the case here, just based on everything that you hear about him. But it's like, think about how Terry Morin built the Indiana women's basketball program. It wasn't, got hired and then boom, like 2 or 3 seasons later, they're going to the Final Fours. It's kind of a step-by-step process. And you have to have, some transfers and some people that you bring in. Maybe they don't do all the things that you want to do, but they help you build certain parts of your culture, right? Like I think about Allie Patberg. And obviously she was, hugely productive, for this program, but had some deficiencies, right? Where she didn't really shoot that well and, maybe wasn't the athlete that you needed at guard. But my goodness, how much toughness and leadership did she bring, to the program? And I think you look at a guy like Sparks, who's now, he's gone through his first couple of seasons. And I think when you see older transfers, kind of like Evan described, a lot of times it's a guy who has had the chance to be the guy, has maybe put up numbers on a team that doesn't win, and now just wants to win. And so now if he, for the next couple years, can help Mike Woodson kind of bridge the gap and help him build the culture that he wants in terms of toughness, because you could tell at times this year, Mike Woodson, either watching the game or talking about it after the game, he wasn't happy with the toughness of this team, whether it was on the glass or just, the competition level that was brought every game. And Sparks is a guy, again, who I think can help you do that. And I think those can be important recruits, assuming everything else goes well and they're able to fit into the role that they're in to help you in kind of this rebuilding process.
You mentioned in earlier shows too, like the Illinois situation didn't work out because I don't know that they were cohesive. They still had a good year. They were 9th seeded. They had to totally rebuild, but they had some troubles at guards. They had some of their guards leave their program, and they have another one of their guards that they put in that got a lot of run late. He left. So it seems like, that they didn't gel as much as they could, and they still had a decent Big Ten season. And you look at a guy like the Jenkins guy who played in his 6th year or something and went to Purdue and was a 18-point per game guy at a lower level school, and then came in and was coming off the bench, and he provided good chemistry and good leadership. So there are examples here locally of a transfer that came in and didn't get the stats, but probably helped a program. And then you had some guys that came in and got stats, but the cohesiveness didn't work out. I think that's that flip of the coin. Evan was talking about that with the transfer portal. I think it's so hard in the speed dating of the transfer portal to know exactly what you're getting. And so give me this guy that is an Indiana guy and has some stats and has some nasty to him in that conference, because I just think that it is, you don't have to have him replace the 20 points, 25 points per game. You need him to do some specific things. And so on the face of it, and maybe it's just my crimson-colored glasses, I think this is what's needed when you're going to have to bring in 6 or 7 new players. You're going to need some culture pieces, some together pieces. It's not just about, the physical stats and abilities. And I think the more I look at this, the more this is a good thing for Indiana basketball.
Yep. Look, if you're looking for this commitment to help you feel better about Indiana's ability to guard on the perimeter, not going to help. You're looking for this to, is Indiana going to be able to go get a bucket at the end of the shot clock when you really need it? This doesn't address that, right? There's a lot of issues that this one doesn't address. But I know the initial reaction from some folks, because it's a low post guy that doesn't shoot, and it's like, oh man, we're getting another one of these guys. I would just urge you to think beyond that. And there's a lot of things that this guy brings that I think Indiana fans are really going to like. They're not always easy to articulate or talk about in the numbers or the scouting reports, but I think you'll like it when you see it out there on the court. And for fans who maybe grew frustrated about, periods of play over the last few years with players who, look, clearly played hard, but didn't maybe always have the passion, or even, to go back to a word I used earlier, the nastiness that sometimes you would like, that you saw maybe from a guy like Xavier Johnson that was conspicuously missing at times like this, at times this year. Sparks is a guy who can do that. And so again, look, if there's a guy that we don't like and we don't think is a good fit, we will certainly say it. And I think there's a chance this could be that if Indiana doesn't get the other guys they need. And so we have to wait for the full offseason to come in to really fully put this in context. But I do think there are a lot of reasons to be patient on this one and to think that this guy is going to bring some things that maybe you don't think you want right now. But man, once you get into the season, it's the kind of stuff we end up complaining about a lot. And he's the guy that can help you combat some of that. And I think that's important. And that's why ultimately I'm on board with this one and really actually kind of excited about it.
A couple of things, too, is depending on what direction Coach Woodson goes with the offense, if it is a more perimeter-oriented offense, you're not going to see as many double teams. And so you're not going to run the offense through the low post. You're going to run some offense through the low post. And if they don't double and you have guys who can show that they can score in certain situations one-on-one, Evan brought that up as well, you need 2 or 3. We know Renew can do that. We know Sparks can come in and probably do that. It's going to be interesting to see the reworking of the offense without just an absolute, great low post player where you went to that all the time. Now you might just go to it some of the time, and your efficiency numbers in the post are going to be interesting to see. I think Sparks fills that coming off the bench just like a Renew does, and maybe the kid Shedrick, that from that you're not looking for someone to run the offense through. If you are, I don't know that you're finding maybe that kid from Oregon, that 5-star guy that only played, got 6 points a game. Maybe you think that he could be that replacement for TJD. If Coach Woodson wants to stay with that, then yeah, you're going to need a really good low post scorer. But I just have a feeling that he's going to go a little different direction. Maybe that's wishful thinking. The other thought is on these transfers to just share with people my thoughts. It's a new world. In my old world, when people left a program, it was a black mark on the program, and people are running from this coach. And what is this coach doing to chase people away? The portal now makes it so different. I don't think you can judge a coach by who leaves. negatively. I guess there could be some individual criticism if it happens too much, but I think you almost have to assume that every program is going to have 2 or 3 players that leave. Heck, there's 1,000 players in the program. There are misfits in almost every basketball program, meaning the player wants to play more or the coach wants to go a different direction, and they have that honest, tough, critical conversation about, hey, you're not going to play for me, and then the kid moves. There's probably a lot more positive about these transfers than there are negatives. So, don't look at Sparks leaving Ball State as like he couldn't handle, Coach Lewis, and so he's looking to leave Ball State. With NIL and with all of the non-sitting out rule, it is not, in my opinion, an indication of poor coaching or whatever. As a whole, automatically anymore. And so, like with Tamar leaving, I don't think that's a negative on Coach Woodson. And if other, Duncombe leaving, it just was the fit wasn't right. And the other thing is that, we put so much pressure on these coaches to win and win now that I think they have the right to use the portal to their advantage as well as the players are using it to their advantage. That if you don't see a fit, then you have that honest conversation with the young man saying, hey, we brought you in. It didn't work out. We like you. We'll help you get to the next, but we need to go a different direction. In the past, that would have been frowned upon. In my age, boy, that, you bring them in for 4 years. You got to promise them 4 years, the athletic, student bill of rights and all of that kind of stuff. It's just over. College basketball is different. It's hard for old guys like me to accept that. But it is. It's about roster construction. It's more of a minor league mindset of each year you could have a different roster, and sometimes it's going to work out and sometimes it's not. And those coaches and staffs who are ahead of the game will end up doing better. Just look at Kansas State. That's the positive side of the portal, right? You bring in guys and you have the right mix and you have the right coach, and man, you have a great run. Be careful about, they're leaving St. John's. Posh Alexander left today. And he's running people out. Well, that's what they're brought in to do, is to, I don't know if it's running people out. It's just being honest with these young men. If you come in and don't produce, you got to produce now. You're getting NIL money. You're getting this. You have to produce. And that coach is on the firing squad, with the fan base and social media and everything. That coach has a right to change his roster and use that portal. So the portal's different. Be careful on the quick in and out judgments when people leave or come in. Look at it more macro. I think that'll do better for your stability and the fan base as a whole. Let's talk in August when this thing settles down about how well Coach Woodson attacked the portal and was he successful in getting the roster that he wants. I think then we can be critical if we want or supportive if we want. Not every time we do an emergency pod. We should just focus on what this means, what it could bring to Indiana, what the young man it has to offer, and then move on. But we need that macro look more than a micro look.
Yeah, and Jay has a good comment about this, surprisingly, in the chat. He said, if IU doesn't get the other guys they need, that doesn't mean taking Sparks was the wrong decision. I agree.
Right.
You have to have the full context of the offseason to kind of judge, okay, how'd they do overall putting the roster together? How is this going to fit? Do we think now Sparks has a role that kind of maximizes him at the Big Ten level? You're going to need to see it all for those reasons. But as I said, this isn't linear. And so you've got a chance right now to take a commitment from Sparks. Do you do it or not? I am fully on board with the staff doing it because I think it's a floor-raising commitment that addresses some real problems. Even though they aren't the headliner problems of shooting and shot creation and some of that stuff, they're real fundamental problems this program has been dealing with in terms of rebounding and toughness and just some of those things. He addresses that, and so I'm fully on board with it, and so I agree with Jay. I think it's the right decision today. You may disagree. Maybe your process for how the staff should do this is different, and you can present your evidence for that. But given the information that everybody has right now, I think it was smart to do this because you still have plenty of other spots to address some of those bigger needs. And this gets to Jeffrey's comment. He says, I don't understand Jerod's perspective. Don't we need a different type of player to go further in the tournament? Doing it only the post way isn't working. Yes. We need a different type of wing. We need a different type of four-man. All that stuff still needs to happen in the portal. That's the stuff that will help raise the NCAA tournament ceiling. I say this raises our floor in the Big Ten in the regular season and helps ensure that we get to the NCAA tournament. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at with this, and you still need some different players to help you. But the other thing, Coach, is you need different ways to win. And Payton Sparks does some things that in certain matchups are going to help you win. And so just because we've all gotten fatigued with the too big thing in a macro sense, there are also lots of games where it worked really well and that we won. And so Sparks gives you that ability as a proven guy down low who can do that. So we do need to recruit a different type of player, but we also need to be able to win different types of ways, and we need kind of guaranteed ways to address some foundational issues with the program that I think Payton Sparks helps you address. So yes, we need that different type of player, but that doesn't mean that Sparks doesn't address important things as well for Indiana.
Well, you need a complete roster. Let's not lose sight that you need a complete roster. You're losing Trace Jackson-Davis, Race Thompson, Logan Duncombe. We don't know officially yet about Geronimo. Right now, he hasn't declared. But if he goes, then you've lost 4 post players in the 4 or 5. You got to replace them. Yes, we need wings, and that's what's, I think, going to determine where Indiana program goes, is getting those dudes like Miami, more dudes like that. Yeah, that's the key thing, but we still got 4 spots, 3 spots officially right now, and potentially 4 spots to go out and get those wings. But you can't just play Malik Renew 40 minutes at the 5. You need another 5. You need another 4. I think the concern comes in if you don't get a stretch 4, then we're going to go back to that 2 low post offense type thing.
Or hoping Caleb Banks develops into it real fast.
Right, but I still think he's going to play the 3. More than the 4. So you need at least 3 guys in that 4 or 5 traditional spots to play, and so Sparks fills one of those roles. So again, that's the timing thing. We got the big first. Everyone thinks we're going to focus in on the 2 bigs. I don't think that says anything about the way Coach Woodson wants to play next year or how he's trying to build this roster. If we get 2 more bigs, then maybe we can come on in that 3rd emergency pod and say, whoa, he's just recruiting bigs, and we are going to go to a big-centered offense. He's going to stay that way. But we can't say it yet.
Right.
We can't say it yet.
And look, if you could get all the positives that Payton Sparks gives you, but it also comes with 3-point shooting and the ability to face the basket, awesome. I'd love to have that. But, given what Payton Sparks does give you, I will take it with some of the deficiencies that he doesn't bring, because the role I think that he's being asked to play will be able to fit that. So it's an ongoing discussion. We'll see. And like everything, we've got to see how it actually works on the court until November. So we're now in that long part of the offseason where we're just kind of speculating and hoping and projecting and doing all that kind of stuff. But I think there's reasons to be excited about this. I certainly am. I think Payton fits some things that we really need. And I think he's going to be a guy that's going to surprise some people once the season starts, where it's like, oh yeah, we needed a guy like this to be able to go kind of bang and do some of these things. And so I think we should all just be patient and at the end of the day, be really excited that another guy who grew up wanting to play for the Hoosiers that is proving himself is coming. The last thing I want to address here, and by the way, we're going to talk about a lot of this more on Assembly Call Radio tomorrow. We'll talk more about tomorrow transferring, all that stuff will be coming. There was one other thing on here, Coach. I don't remember who it was, but it was basically, something like, Michael Lewis can't be happy that he's leaving. I would say, to a certain extent, in the position that Michael Lewis is in now, Coach, I think you want your program to be able to sell to certain guys who may be between the high major and, kind of MAC level, hey, we can help you get there, right? It's like the narrative of if Jalen Hood-Schifino comes in for one season and then goes to the NBA, that's now a story that Mike Woodson can sell on the recruiting trail to similar type guys. Hey, you can come in here, give me 1 or 2 good seasons, and I'm going to help you achieve your dreams. And I think Michael Lewis quite clearly looks at this, and I know he's close with Eric from Hoosier Hysterics. I think Eric might have said this in a place or two, that Michael Lewis really views his role as helping guys achieve their dreams. And when you do that, that means sometimes it may not be the best thing for you next season, but in the larger scope, if you build your program around helping guys get to where they want to go, and if you have this player who wanted to play for Indiana now has a chance to do it, that's also a great story to be able to sell on the recruiting trail, to be able to get the next guys. And so, yeah, I'm sure there's a part of Michael Lewis that is disappointed not to have this terrific player, just like there's going to be parts of Mike Woodson in Indiana that would love to have Jalen Hood-Schifino for another year. But it also can kind of be helpful to the growth of your program long term to have some of those stories in your back pocket to be able to sell to the next guys that are coming down the road. And it seems like that's kind of how Michael Lewis looks at this, and I think that's probably a pretty good reason why he's been successful in his coaching career. So I'm sure he's disappointed to lose the talent, but happy for the individual, and I'm sure understands exactly how that'll help him land the next player like Payton Sparks.
You know, you have to adapt to the ways of the world. We can sit here and bemoan the portal. The portal hurts mid-majors because they're going to lose their best talent. That's just a given. So you as a mid-major coach can sit there and just rue the fact that your best players are going to leave, or you can embrace it and say, I'm going to have to win with these guys in year 1 or 2. The other thing you can do as a mid-major coach is understand you're going to get better recruits now because there's less recruiting of players in the high school level. If you can fill stuff from the portal and you can take someone from Ball State with 2 years of experience in a good league, you're probably going to take a Payton Sparks over an equally kind of talented high school post that you're going to have to sit and develop. So there's going to be less recruiting of high school players, which is a negative overall for me as a high school guy. But your elite 5 stars and 4 stars are still going to get heavily recruited. But those underdeveloped, 4 stars and 3 stars might have to go to a smaller school, prove their ways, and then go to where they want to end up going down the road. So as a mid-major coach, you take advantage of that. So now you can go on that recruiting trail and say, hey, listen, we are a place where we can get you to that next level. Come play for us for 2 years. And then the struggle is that you're going to have to be a really good coach to get freshmen and sophomores at Ball State, at Indiana State, at Valpo, or wherever you're at. You got to sell that, and then you got to win with young and maybe hope that a couple of your dudes stay 3 and 4. But it's just like the college level where you're going to lose a Hood-Schifino, you're going to lose a 2-year player, and then you got to replace that player. But you got to embrace it as a mid-major coach. Also, if I'm a mid-major coach and I have aspirations to go to the Big Ten or to the ACC, I want to make sure that I show that I can develop players to play at that league. So now that boosts my own personal resume too. I've taken over Ball State. We finished 4th or 5th in the conference. We were tough out all year long. I got a guy that came in 1 year. I got him to a level where he can go play at the Big Ten. Bring that next guy in, that 4-star that couldn't go where he wanted. He's going to come to Ball State. And now you have a resume that when, that big school in that Power 6 or Power 5 wants to come, you have shown that ability to do those things, to build those players. So it is a new world. And for a lot of us who have grown up in the college basketball world without NIL, without the transfer portal, it is very difficult to handle. But you know what? I like high-definition televisions a lot better than that old, set that was 8,000 pounds, and I had to get up and actually go and turn the channel. I kind of like streaming. The world advances, and whether this is ultimately good or bad, time will tell. But college basketball isn't going anywhere. And people were paid 20 years ago anyway. So it's just a different world, and those coaches have to adapt or you're going to just get swallowed up. And I think Coach Lewis is, probably sad, but there's a lot more positives to it if you want to look at it that way.
I should mention now, an hour and 22 minutes into this broadcast, that this is the Assembly Call. We are part of the Back Home Network. We are sponsored by the fine folks at Home Field Apparel. I am wearing my Home Field Apparel Indiana crew neck. I absolutely love it. Coach is wearing an Auburn hoodie. It's okay. Auburn. It's all good. Wish we'd had a chance to play Auburn in the NCAA tournament. But go to homefieldapparel.com. Use our promo code HOME. I saw, if you want to support Dusty May in Florida Atlantic, they have an FAU collection with a really cool Out of the Way shirt that I thought was very clever. So go check out our friends at homefieldapparel.com. Use that promo code HOME, and you will get 15% off your first order. Stay tuned for Assembly Call Radio. That is coming tomorrow night. I don't know what the lineup is. I'm pretty sure Ryan will be there so he can give you his in-depth Payton Sparks scouting report. We'll talk about whatever other transfer news out or in that there may be. Visits set up. Coach Woodson has visited Nicholas Timberlake. He's visited Chris Ledtham. I think they did an in-home with Jamison Battle either last night or today. So a lot of things are happening. We will do our best to keep you updated on them. And when news breaks like this, we will always do our best to get an emergency pod up as quickly as possible. Can't always promise it'll be this quickly. If this had happened yesterday, I wouldn't have been able to do this. But we try to do it as close to the news as we can, give you some instant reactions. And so glad that we were able to hop on here today. Coach, give me your final thoughts as the first domino falls for Indiana in terms of players coming in for the transfer portal.
I'm just looking at this as exciting with the transfer portal because we have a chance to rebuild a program. If this were 5-10 years ago, we were looking at a year that we're just going to have to, play a lot of freshmen, and you get a transfer and they have to sit a year. So it's new. It's new and it's exciting. Coach Woodson has gotten us back to the tournament 2 years in a row. He's going to do everything possible to get us back that third year in a row. And we're going to have some new dudes to root for and figure out next year, which makes our show really interesting in the offseason on how this all plays out. And it's just part of the process. So I think Sparks is a good addition. When I first heard the news, I was like, okay, that's the first one. And then the more I thought about it last night, and as I heard the rumors last night, and then when I heard official this morning got on, and as we've talked, I think this is a very good piece for Indiana. Glad that I'm on spring break, and so I was able to jump on. Even next week, the students, I'll give them a worksheet or something and jump on from school if I have to.
You need emergency worksheets ready.
Emergency
so when you hear that sound.
Yeah, when you hear the sirens, kids, grab the worksheets and be quiet. Right. So I'll pack my microphone every day just in case. But I think it brings a little bit of juice to the off season. We do this for many years, and sometimes off season can be a little bit of a grind, and it will again at some point slow down. But this is fun stuff, and we get to talk about how all these pieces fit in. But welcome to the program. And let's get to work, and we'll see where the next domino falls.
Yeah, I'm glad we get a chance to come on here and in a long-form way talk through this stuff. Because, last year there was talk about Payton Sparks maybe being a guy Indiana was going to look at. And this year when it happened again, I'll be honest, my first thought is, this isn't the guy. Why do we need kind of an undersized big man who's kind of needs post touches to succeed and can't really step out and shoot? Like, haven't we been doing this? And so everybody who had that reaction, I get it. But I really do feel like this is one you start, again, peeling back the layers of the onion, looking at it from some different angles. It starts to make sense, because as much as I was frustrated by playing a too big lineup that couldn't step out and shoot, I also at times got frustrated by a too big lineup that couldn't rebound. And that would just let balls just bounce, and that at times seemed to have a lack of aggressiveness, and that at times could go out there and get punked by opponents for certain stretches. I think when you bring a Payton Sparks onto your roster, you reduce the likelihood of that happening a lot. And so he's not going to be as efficient on twos as Trace Jackson Davis. And there's probably going to be some games where he's 1 for 5 from the field and goes 1 for 4 from the free throw line. It's like, man, that wasn't a very efficient offensive day for Payton Sparks. Okay, how hard did he play? How tough was he? Did he just, I remember some of those conversations last year about Geo Baker talking about how no one's afraid to play Indiana. Well, you know what? Payton Sparks is the kind of guy that people are going to be afraid to play with because he's going to bang on you. He's going to be physical. You're not going to want to play him. And if you're putting him out there with a guy like X, I think you start to develop a bit of a different attitude. And the formula for winning is going to be a little bit different. We've got to see what the final roster looks like and what the overall strategy is. But I think no matter what that is, there is room in the rotation of players maybe not your top 7, but in that 8 to 10, there's room for a guy who can rebound. There's room for a guy who's tough. There's room for a guy who's going to be an everyday practice player. There's room for a guy who draws fouls and does the stuff that Payton Sparks brings. So, I was a little lukewarm with it at the beginning, but this is one where you dig into it. I think you start to find a lot of reasons to like it and a lot of reasons to think he can be a very useful foundational piece for the next couple years. You don't want him to be the highlight piece. You don't want the offense running through him. But I think you can get a lot out of Payton Sparks if he's playing 10, 15 minutes a game for what he's going to do for you on the court in games and what he's going to do for you, on the court in practice. And that's the kind of stuff we don't always see, but I think is important and is probably part of the calculus for bringing a guy like Payton Sparks in. So, again, on all this stuff, we wait to see how it all works out. But ultimately, I feel much better about it after digging into it, talking to people about Sparks than I did just initially kind of seeing the top line, measurables, stats, all that stuff. I think you got to dig in a little bit and you start to realize all the reasons to like this. All right. That is going to do it for us here on this special edition of the Assembly Call. Just a random Wednesday emergency podcast going for 90 minutes. That is what we do. But join Jeff and Kathy. Doing the Work is going to be on tonight, I think at 8 o'clock Eastern time. So make sure that you check them out and then check us out, Assembly Call Radio, tomorrow night. We'll announce the lineup, but some iteration of us will be there talking about Payton Sparks, talking about Tamar Bates. All of that is coming. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Here I come, Mrs. Tonsoni.
And literally, Coach is off to see Mrs. Tonsoni. Folks, you want to know the dedication. They waited to watch the second episode of Ted Lasso so that we could do this podcast. Coach, that is dedication to the offseason, to the Indiana offseason. We appreciate it.
I had a breakfast date with Mrs. Tonsoni for breakfast and Ted Lasso. And now it's lunch. It's
more of a lunch date, but that's okay.
Now it's a lunch date with Ted Lasso and Mrs. Tonsoni. So hopefully she's smiling as I walk back up the steps. I don't have to duck anything, but yeah.
Yes.
I was like you, lukewarm, and now I'm more into it and okay. And no matter what you feel about certain things from Coach Woodson wants to win and wants to bring Indiana back, and we got to have a little level of trust to this thing plays out. And when it's fully played out, then we can really dive in to say whether we like the roster or not like the roster. And I think, but this was a good piece. The more I think about it.
Yep.
So.
I agree.
All right, I got to go have my lunch date.
Yeah, get out of here. Go, Coach.
Go, hurry. See ya.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you all on Thursday night. See ya.